Hello and welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast with your hosts Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Join us for conversations and interviews on the topics of apologetics, evangelism, and the Christian worldview.
I celebrate the guy's entire catalog.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Brian Auten.
And I'm Chad Gross.
And we're back from a little bit of a hiatus. We've been having technical problems with cables, problems with laptops, problem with scheduling. I got 99 problems, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've had quite the few issues. We've tried to a couple times record the Rational Faith 2. And when we've come on, we've had audio issues and issues with the platform we use, Riverside. And so it has been a little frustrating. So hopefully we're going to be able to get through today. That's what we're praying. And everything goes off without a hitch, as they say.
Yeah, we even had that debate between Alvin Plantinga and Richard Dawkins, but then the audio got corrupted and, we were going to release that. So
Right. Which, I mean, I'm kind of glad because, we could do better than Richard Dawkins. So.
Yeah. So anyway, today we have a actual guest and it's actually going to happen today. Dr. Braxton Hunter is with us. He's president of Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary in Evansville, Indiana. He's former president of the Conference of Southern Baptist Evangelists. He's a pastor, educator, and seasoned debater. And so he holds a PhD in Christian apologetics, other degrees and such, and has authored several works on Christian apologetics. If you want to know more, go to his bio at braxtonhunter.com. Yeah, braxtonhunter.com/about, and you will find everything you want. So, Chad, what are your hopes and dreams for this podcast interview today?
You all right over there?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Well, the best way I can introduce Braxton and kind of what I hope to get out of the interview today is, have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and about apologetics and they'll bring up a certain speaker that they came across, and sometimes your inner thought when they bring that person up is, oh man, not that guy.
And that's Braxton.
Yeah. No. It's like actually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
If somebody stumbled across Braxton Hunter and they told me that they had been listening to him, I would be greatly encouraged by that. And it's because not only is he extremely knowledgeable, he's very clear. He's able to, what people have classically called, put the cookies on the bottom shelf, if you will. But he does so in such a winsome, thoughtful, inviting way. He kind of invites people into the conversation about Christianity in just his manner. And I love that about him. And so what I'm hoping today is, first of all, he recently made an announcement on his YouTube channel, which is called Trinity Radio, which he'll talk about. So I'm not going to go into what that is. But he made an announcement, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about that. I also want to talk to him about, how do you do effective online apologetics? Because you and I both know that we can point to people who are doing it very well, and then we can point to people who we hope no one stumbles across, right? And if I'm somebody sitting at home and I'm kind of feeling that leading of, maybe I need to engage online, maybe I need to start something like that, what are some things that Braxton would advise them to do? What are some maybe mistakes he's made? And how does he decide what to engage with and what not to engage with? Because it's such like a vast body of information. And then finally, how does he manage to engage in such a way that he doesn't sacrifice truth, but he does so in such a way that invites people into the discussion? And then if there's time, and this is completely self-indulgent, I will confess that on the onset, I hope to ask him a few kind of behind the scenes fun questions about a debate he had with Matt Dillahunty, which I did a post on Truth Bomb, something about my favorite debates or something like that. And that one is on there. He also did a wonderful debate on free will with Dan Barker. But according to Dan Barker, Barker had no choice as to whether or not he participated. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking for the interview. And this is somebody I've wanted to have on, as you know, for a long time. So I'm pretty excited about it, actually.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Well, come on, join us for this conversation. We invite you in. Let's go to the interview.
Let's get ready. Switch me on.
Well, Braxton Hunter, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here, guys. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I've really appreciated and admired the ministry here at Apologetics 315 for so long, and the work that both of you guys do. It's kind of like I feel like maybe I've made it now that I'm on Apologetics 315 this way.
Well, we're super excited to have you on. I think that you came on my radar. I was trying to think yesterday when exactly I started watching your content, but I know that when you became kind of at one of the top people on my list, if you will, if somebody said, "Hey, where can I learn about apologetics on YouTube?" You would make that list as after your debate with Matt Dillahunty. I was just so impressed by that. And again, I was watching your stuff before that, but that kind of cemented it for me. And I've wanted to have you on here for, gosh, Brian, a couple years now?
Yeah, but I kept saying, no, man, no, he hasn't made it yet.
Totally understandable. You were right, Brian.
He hasn't made it yet.
You're the
Exactly. So anyway, it's just such a pleasure to talk to you. When I joined Brian on the podcast, when we rebooted it, there was a short list of people that were kind of if I do this and I don't get to interview these people, I'll be disappointed. And you were on that short list. And so I'm very excited.
Well, that means a lot to me. And let me tell you about you personally. When you post like lists of what's going on in apologetics, I always think of you. I always thought of you as like one of the guys at the cool kids table online. And so like when I get referenced, it's like, oh, wow, he saw that, so the feeling here is very mutual. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I just would want listeners to hear a little bit about you. Like, how did you become a Christian? What's your background? A little bit about your family, because I know that's very important to you. And so just kind of let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. I was born the son of a megachurch pastor at a time when megachurches were starting to become more of an obvious thing and have television ministries at the time in the early 80s. So my father pastored a church called North Jacksonville Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida. And for the first 10 years of my life, I was there. That church had 5,000 in regular attendance, an auditorium that seated 3,500. And I thought that was normal. I just was proud to be there, happy to be there, enjoyed all of that. My parents went out of their way to make me and my brother feel as though we were not the pastor's kid in the stereotypical sense, where there's all these responsibilities on you and people are, oh, that's the pastor's kid. He should know all the Bible, all the books of the Bible by heart and all that kind of thing. It was never like that. In fact, that's why I have an unbiblical name, is because my parents knew about pastors that had their children were like Joseph and Mary and Philip. And so he wanted us to not have even that, and so he went out of his way, and my mother, to create that sort of environment. So I really enjoyed being the son of a pastor. And when I got into my teenage years, I wanted to be a rock star. U2 was my favorite band, is still my favorite band, and I wanted to be Bono. But I didn't want to be a preacher at all, because my dad was a preacher and I thought that was lame and I didn't want to be a preacher. So, but then on a youth trip, I really felt that God wanted me to go into the ministry. And, you asked about my salvation. I was saved at a young age. But like a lot of people, I prayed to receive Christ multiple times. But the ultimate thing is, I know that one of those times my heart was in it. I was doing it for the right reasons and became a follower of Christ. But I went into the ministry then as a 17-year-old. I surrendered to the gospel ministry, is how we phrased it in my church background. And I wasn't happy about it, really. That's one of the reasons I know it was real, is because it was not the thing I picked for myself. I wanted to be Bono, right? I wanted to be a rock star. And so, but my dad, even though he was a preacher, wanted me to be really sure about this. And so I started going to school for a music business degree. I realized by that point I wasn't going to be Bono, but I could make money off of other people that might want to be Bono and be a manager or something. But an academic advisor there, who was an atheist woman, said, well, I was trying to arrange my courses so they would fit with what it was I was wanting to do for the Lord in addition to music business. So I was taking some philosophy classes, some religion classes. And she said, why don't you just stop this and go to seminary? That's where your heart is. And so that's what I did. And then over time, I got interested in, I pastored 2 churches, but got interested in full-time traveling evangelistic preaching. But I was realizing that there are people out there that don't take it for granted that they can believe the Bible or believe that Jesus is God or believe that there's a heaven. You know, one of the key questions in one of the faith soul winning program was one of the big soul winning programs, so-called, in the late 90s and early 2000s. And the key question you want to get people to is, in your personal opinion, what do you understand it takes for a person to go to heaven? Well, that assumes they believe in a heaven. That assumes they believe it. So I picked up apologetics really just as a way of moving forward with my evangelism. And that's still what I use apologetics primarily for, is I want people to come to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And over time, that resulted in a degree program at Trinity College and Seminary, where I'm now in administration. And worked through that program and ultimately got a degree from there, and then went to another school, Luther Rice, and got a Doctor of Ministry degree there. And so, and then went into administration here. But what I began to realize when I was on the road was that there needs to be a way, and maybe this is where I kind of enter back into the discussion about where I'm at now, is there needs to be a way for regular church people, regular Christians, who think they can't understand some of the principles and ideas with making a case that Christianity is true, in a way that they can pick that up and go use it, or at least know where to go back to use it. And so that's what I've tried to create with my ministry, both online and in written materials.
I love that. And one of the things I really appreciate about you, and I want to get to an announcement you recently made, but in that announcement, you talked about how when somebody were to listen to that, and you obviously have a lot going on, one of the things that's important to you is keeping your family first, right? Mm. And so tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, yeah, I have my wife, Sarah. We met in college, and we met because neither one of us had been good at math in high school. And so we were both in math classes for dummies, an intermediate algebra class. So if you're a young person out there and you're like, why doesn't God just give me the ability to understand this thing or whatever? Hey, it may be the way that God's working something out in your life, because if either one of us had been good at math, we might not have met. And she's really, when I was a pastor and in evangelism, she was very instrumental in all of that. And now we have two daughters who are, as I say, 17 and 14 years old. And man, I'll tell you, growing up, a lot of people would always tell you, well, when they become teenagers, that's where everything changes. And with both of my daughters, we've spent a lot of time, particularly this summer and this spring, talking through things and all of that. And I'm just going to tell you, struggling over, like, am I doing the right thing to foster the right worldview and all of that? My daughter, who's in the room with me right now, could tell you that for a period of time over a year, I would put together PowerPoints just for her, and we would stand in the living room and we would go over some of the apologetic ideas, how to make a case for the resurrection and that sort of thing.
Oh, I love that.
And so I haven't been the greatest father or husband, but that is something that matters the most to me. I would turn off Trinity Radio, my online outlet, and never go back to it if doing that would guarantee for me that my family would turn out as God wants them to turn out. So in that sense, they definitely come first.
I love that. Tell us about Trinity Radio.
So in about 2009, I began a podcast, so-called, on a rudimentary Macintosh website back when they hosted web for you. And I couldn't even call it a podcast. I just made a piece of audio responding to like the New Atheist or something and just posted it on this website. I don't even know if anybody ever saw it. They probably didn't. And then I just kept going with that. And the year after I started doing that, I was in Florida speaking in Miami in an area called Hialeah, which is where a lot of Cuban Americans, when people come from Cuba, this is like one of the first areas they come to is Hialeah in Miami. And one of the large churches there had me come and speak, and I had to use a translator and all that. But with 2 days preparation, they got the professor of world religions at Florida International University, Daniel Alvarez. He's in a viral Cliff Connectley video now, but he to debate me on the arguments for God's existence and all that. So with 2 days to prepare, I did my best William Lane Craig cosplay, and we got through it, and I felt good about that. But then that kind of opened up the channel, or it wasn't a channel, but the podcast a little bit. And then I had a couple of little debates with atheists online there at that time. And it was just me in my attic in downtown Evansville, Indiana. And when we brought on a guy named Jonathan Pritchett, who is now our vice president of academic affairs at our school, Trinity Seminary, he was inclined to join the podcast with me. And what was great about that is we kind of have a good cop, bad cop type vibe. He
Right.
says the hard thing, and then I'm like, now, Pritchett. And that's how most of our audience has grown, is through that sort of a relationship. And I'm guessing that by you kind of laughing at that, Chad, you've seen that.
Oh,
and
yes.
So we did that. And then really quickly after the Matt Dillahunty debate, we had just gotten to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we grew 2,000 or 3,000 very quickly after that. And then I had a debate with Dan Barker from the Freedom of from Religion Foundation on Unbelievable, and we grew a bit more dramatically after that. And so it just kind of moved on from there. And then guys like Mike Winger and Cameron Bertuzzi and John McRae from What Do You Meme, they all kind of we were in a group chat together, and they really, really helped me and gave me advice on how to do this thing of online ministry. And so from that point, that kind of took off, and now here we are.
Yes. I love the interactions between you and Pritchett sometimes are so funny. And it's really neat because it's one of those deals where, obviously today's the first time I'm meeting you. I've never met him, but in a sense, I feel like I could just walk into a room and sit down and talk with you guys.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So that's so endearing. I love that. So recently on Trinity Radio, you made an announcement, kind of a new project or initiative. I'm not sure how you'd want to characterize that. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to share that so that churches might want to consider taking advantage of it.
Well, I really appreciate that you are giving me that platform. I wrote a book that it came out originally in 2014 called Core Facts. And I'm a classical apologist. And for those that don't know what that means, there's a great book called 5 Views on Apologetics. And it goes through the 5 different methodologies that generally people use. But the thing that's interesting about the classical approach is it has 2 steps to it. So the first step is to show that that God exists. You're not specifying the Christian God, although this God is consistent, obviously, with Christianity. You're showing that some form of that theism proper is true, that God exists. And then the second step is to show that Jesus is God through something like the resurrection, a case for the resurrection. And so those are the 2 steps. So I wrote this book, Core Facts, which is an acrostic because I'm a weird dad. And so I like dad humor. And I realize that acrostics are weird dad things, but they're also really helpful in remembering. And so the word core, each letter of the word core stands for a different piece of the case for God's existence. So like the C is the universe has a cause. Well, that's like the cosmological argument or something. And then O is for order. So that's a design argument. And it goes on from there. And then the facts are all facts. Though each letter there stands for things related to the resurrection of Jesus, the case for Jesus. And so I like the F is fatal. His wounds on the cross were fatal. The A is appeared. He appeared to people after his death. C is for committed. The disciples were committed to the point they were willing to die for that. Those kind of things. And so what that does is highlights what I think is a benefit of the classical approach, where if you're talking to someone who already believes in God, they just have a problem accepting Jesus. Well, then you can drop the core and just go with the facts, because the core part is the part that has to do with arguments for God. Or if you guys remember at the beginning of the book, The Case for Faith from Lee Strobel, he shares this interview with a guy, Charles Templeton, who was Billy Graham's associate, but became an atheist. And when in that interview that he had with him there, Templeton says, well, I love Jesus. I miss Jesus, And well, with such a person, you might not even end up needing to give the facts about Jesus. They're ready to accept Jesus if they could just believe that naturalism weren't true, that they could believe that there was a God or something. So it's flexible in that way. So I wrote that book, came out with that book. It was sold. It was bought by by a conference and then schools to use for things like this. I've sold it for years now, and I've been really pleased with that. And recently I rewrote it for a second edition to make it even more understandable and easy to grapple with for newcomers. And honestly, this is going to sound a bit arrogant. I hope that you're not getting that vibe from me, but I really believe this resource is among the best for that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And with my D-Men project, I'm wrapping this up here. I'm going long-winded, but hey, I'm a Southern Baptist evangelist at heart. So I get to say, I'll let you go in a moment 3 times.
Exactly. You get to close your sermon 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, I get to and hold you there. We'll do another song. We'll do Just As I Am for the invitation. But the thing is, so I thought, hey, this needs to be something that's taken on the road to churches, because for my D-Men project, I did exactly that. I did a Likert scale test, like 1 to 5. how confident and how competent are you in using the apologetics? And I did that with a group of interested church members who we might call lay people. And we took them on a Friday night, a Saturday, and then I spoke at the church on Sunday. And during that time, from Friday to Saturday, we just went through some of the material that's in Core Facts, and we did a Likert scale test, and they were not very confident and not very competent before, and then they were much more or substantially more afterward. Now, that didn't mean they knew everything about apologetics, but what it meant was they were growing in confidence. Well, that was a great test for me to know that if we could get this going in churches where, say, I come in for a weekend with a box full of Core Facts that everyone's going to go through, and we're going to work on a Friday night and a Saturday to understand this material as best we can. I'm going to teach it. We're going to talk it. We're going to workshop it. And then on Sunday, I preach a message to the church kind of geared toward sending a rally cry that, hey, this church is going to start a Core Facts group, and we want you to commit today to be a part of that and be in that group. Then I think that would go a long way toward increasing the church in America's ability to do apologetics with the average person. And I think pastors over the past 20 years have been told, you need apologetics. And they're like, okay, we do, you're right. But how do I do that? I'm just me. I'm the guy might not even been to seminary. And we can also help organize the church in ways that would be helpful for doubters. And so I'd like to advise them that way. And so in the coming year, I'm planning on launching that. And I've already got a couple of churches that are lined up that want to have me come do this. I'm hoping God will bless and open a lot more doors. I'm not looking to make a career out of this or anything. I just want the church in America to be able to give an answer when someone asks in this increasingly secular age.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, anybody getting into apologetics, we were talking before the podcast started about resources and stuff on the Apologetics 315 website. And one of the things we made at one point was how to get apologetics in your church. And there's a lot of different approaches, but something that can be plugged in to a church that is ready to equip them. It takes the requirement for there's someone to be within the church as a primary driver for doing that. You can call upon that external resource, plug it in, and then kickstart something rather than having someone from within the church having to drive it. That's a really helpful approach and crucial right now.
Right. And have you guys noticed in your own churches that, like in typical churches, there's at least one or two weirdo apologetics junkies, and they don't understand why everyone's not that way. Well, yeah. That's the perfect kind of person to kind of help facilitate small groups. And most churches have someone like that. Yeah.
One of the things that really stuck out to me when I listened to your announcement was you have the reasonable faith groups through William Lane Craig's organization. That Stand to Reason does Outpost, which I lead one of those. But the thing I love about what you're doing is when somebody starts a Reasonable Faith chapter or somebody starts a Stand to Reason Outpost, like, I love these guys and I understand, probably some of the limitations they have or whatnot, but like, you're not getting William Lane Craig to come do like a 3-day introduction to your Reasonable Faith chapter. Right. You're not getting Greg Kokel to come and do a 3-day introduction to what this looks like. And that's no slight to them because they have their own focuses. And again,
I'm not William Lane Craig or Greg Kokel either. So
but the point is that that's such a feature that stuck out to me of like, whoa, like what a great way to get people pumped about it, to have you actually come, the author of the book, lay it out, and it's such a support to the person who would decide that they would want to start this Core Facts group.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And, one of the things about my ministry is, again, like some people are into apologetics just because it's interesting. Some are because someone in their family is become an atheist. And even among Christian apologists, well-known ones, some of them are in it because they want to put out there what's true, and maybe the church can use that however they will. But I was in the car with a somewhat well-known apologist a couple of years ago. We were at a conference together, and we were talking, and he said, well, what's the focus of your ministry that makes it different? And I said, well, I'm an evangelist. I believe I'm an Ephesians 4:11 evangelist. And so my apologetics serves evangelism. And the guy was like, and this is a well-known apologist, and he was like, apologetics for evangelism. Huh. What about that? And I'm thinking, well, what better reason to defend the faith but that someone might believe the faith, right? That seems obvious to me. But I have a pastoral background. I have a very pastoral background. In fact, I work with Talk About Doubts, which is a ministry that for people that have doubts, they can call in and talk to an apologist. I talked to a guy yesterday. I've done that for a few years now. Jonathan McClatchy heads that up. But in that, they usually send me like someone who has some doubts, but they need pastoral care for that reason. And I'm not saying I'm the best at that, but I think that kind of person that understands the church mindset and how church people think and receive information and has been a preacher, is able to kind of bring it down home in a way that maybe I think William Lane Craig, for example, would admit that that doesn't do that as much. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it when I watched, just for preparation for this to refresh, I rewatched the Dillahunty debate, which honestly, I probably didn't need to. I just wanted to. And then I rewatched the Dan Barker one, which, gosh, I would love to just do a whole podcast about that, but that's a whole other thing. Fascinating. But one of the things I loved in the Dillahunty debate, at some point, and I'm paraphrasing, you're basically like, yeah, I know this doesn't sound cool, but like, I'm an evangelist at heart. Like, I'm not going to apologize for that. And I'm like, yeah.
I didn't know I said that in that debate, but
you did. Yeah, you did. I don't know if it was during the Q&A or the debate itself, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I was the president of the Conference of Southern Baptist Evangelists. I go to a non-denominational church right now, but I was the youngest ever president of the Conference of Southern Baptist Evangelists, which is an official, NAM, North American Mission Board thing with SBC. And what I noticed there was we had great evangelists, so don't get me wrong, but they had decreased from like 2,200 evangelists in the 70s down to like, I don't know, a couple hundred. And a lot of them were like puppet ministry or, a singer that was an evangelist. We had a saxophone player that was an evangelist. Great people. God's using them. Don't want to take away from that. But there had become a little bit of an idea about evangelists. Of course, we see this in the culture in general. This is the guy who's kind of a redneck, hillbilly, backwoods, doesn't really know the Bible. And so if I have a chance standing on the debate floor, especially if I feel like I've just done well, increasing that stock in evangelist a little bit, I want to try to do it.
Yeah, I love it.
Chick tracks.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
We could do hunt tracks. We'll do hunter tracks.
I would prefer hunter tracks. Yeah. Thank you. I don't even need to see one to know that I would prefer a hunter track. Right. It's not even a debate. So you talked about engaging online. And one of the reasons I wanted to reach out to you is because if anybody goes on your videos or even, again, not to beat a dead horse, but the Dillahunty debate, people are very taken, meaning atheists, are very taken often by your approach. They'll say things, I've seen things like, I don't agree with Braxton, but he's the most reasonable Christian I've heard, or something along those lines. And what I've told Brian when we did the intro, we kind of pre-recorded an intro. I said, how when I'm talking to people about apologetics, sometimes they'll say, I was listening to fill in the blank. And on the inside, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish that wasn't who you were listening to for various reasons. But if they were to say, I stumbled upon this guy, Braxton Hunter, with Jonathan Pritchett, it would greatly encourage me, because the way you present Christianity in a reasonable, rational manner, but it's so winsome and thoughtful, and you're able to engage even on really difficult kind of hot button issues in a way that I think invites people in, which is something I want to learn to get better at as well. And so I guess thinking about when you engage online, like, what are some of the guiding principles that you keep in mind that enable you to be able to engage in that way? Sorry, that was very long-winded.
No, I appreciate it. I don't mind people being long-winded when they're saying how wonderful I am. But the truth is, I have a hard time being a jerk in general. There's some people that's their spiritual gift, is being a jerk to people online. That's not me. And so as a result, like, I want to be, I'm inclined already to be nice to people. Also, like, sometimes the thing and look, God has a place in his kingdom for different types of utensils here. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people can come off kind of as a jerk because they're not totally confident in the strength of the argument, and they might see an attack as a threat to their faith or something. And as an apologist, if you got an online ministry, that you should be confident enough about this that when you're going out to do this, that you're not bothered when they say, that, well, the problem of evil, shoots down theism or something or whatever, or at least shoots down an all powerful God. Well, I'm not worried about that because I know how this argument goes. I've seen the answers, and we ought to have confidence. But the nice thing, I'm already keyed up to be that way. And I'm kind of a people pleaser, and that can be too much. That's why it's good that Pritchett is my balance, even though he can be a blunt force instrument sometimes. We balance each other that way because I can go too far and water things down where I shouldn't, trying to make it. I have good relationships with some of the big atheist creators. I've had conversations with Alex O'Connor privately, and we were supposed to debate, but he couldn't get over to America. It was during COVID. And then I have good relationships with like Apologia, if people know who Apologia is online, people like that. And Matt Dillahunty and I were very pleasant. I'm sure he doesn't like me now because I've covered him much more straightforwardly since the debate. But the fact is, I wanted to have good relationships. Now, I will say that some of the relationships I've had with atheists have this will make me sound thin-skinned, but have hurt me a little bit because some of them did turn coat on me kind of and that sort of thing. But not all of them have. And I think that seeing people like that as humans and all the things you would expect to hear an apologist say, that's important stuff. But another thing about it is when you're doing this kind of thing online, I think, especially if you're not like a professional content creator, I think that sometimes if it starts to get to like on Twitter, I still call it Twitter, or Facebook or something, and you feel like it's getting contentious, one of the problems there is everybody wants to save face. So it might be good to invite, as an individual Christian, invite that person to a private chat or DMs or something where you can have, where there's no performative side to that. That's one thing that I really try to do. Another thing is share the gospel as quickly as you can, even in not in a forced way, but a guy, I was speaking at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary's Defend conference a few years ago, and someone asked me about this. And this came to my mind in the moment. So maybe it's like the Holy Spirit prompting me. I don't know. But the idea here is you may not get to say much to them because they might get distracted, or in a debate, you might go off on other things. So try to get the gospel in there as soon as you can so that if nothing else happens, hey man, the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. So if we can get that out there and then what we say is gravy on top of that, I think that's really important. And those are kind of some principles that also don't assume people have all the knowledge you have about how all this works. Sometimes even my co-host, I'll notice him presuming knowledge on the part of the people that are in our audience. And, make things as basic as possible, even if you have a more complex, advanced channel, I think.
Yeah, that's another thing I was telling Brian when we recorded the intro is that I think, people always use the phrase putting the cookies on the bottom shelf. And I think that you're very good at that. Like even in the debate, both of the debates, free will came up, both the debates we mentioned. I know you've done others. And, that can be very complex. I mean, that can be a hard thing to follow, but I feel like even if that was somebody's first time hearing that, they could walk away and go, okay, I need to learn more, but I think I followed that. But that takes work and being intentional.
Well, I did try to use a lot of illustration and things like that. And, a lot of the comments, obviously, on that video of the debate as it exists on Dillahunty's channel and on mine, a lot of the ones, at least on my channel, are negative. Obviously, overwhelmingly, it's atheists pointing out that I'm just worshiping my sky daddy or whatever it is. But a lot of them, a substantially more, I think, than is typical on these debates are like, well, I think Braxton's wrong, but man, he was a nice guy, enjoyable to listen to. I've had people say that they came to Christ after watching that debate, and we've shared those publicly. So, I think just trying to be friendly with like in the Dillahunty debate, I said, hey, I don't know who's going to win this, but I guarantee it will be someone, it will be a bald-headed and bearded man. Well, something as simple as that, we're both bald-headed, bearded guys. We joke around. I think that just takes some of the steam off of it. Now, maybe that's not always how it should be. Maybe there is someone who is propagating something in a very straightforward way that is hurting people, is evil. Maybe we be more firm, but I still think the love is important.
But like even in the Barker debate, where I was so impressed with how you went out of your way to point out to him that the chipmunk thing, the chipmunk climbing up on him or whatever, like endeared him to you. And I think it's important as apologists, and you really model this, I think, to be vulnerable in that way. You know, to say like, hey, I really care about you, and I saw that you did this and I appreciated it, or it endeared me to you, or something like that. And I think that's a good lesson people could learn from you.
Well, I'm glad you saw it that way. And the most important thing, I think, about all of this is if you don't know the answer to something, here's what you say. Take notes on this. I don't know. That's the answer. If you don't know something, say, I don't know. Because first of all, that is also disarming. You validated their question, you know. Secondly, when you try to make up an answer, see, I was raised a little bit in the Southern Baptist world to think if you're the preacher, you thump the pulpit and say, thus saith the Lord, even if you don't know what the Lord thus saith about that. And guess what? That's how cults and false religions begin. So if you don't know, say, I don't know, but I'll go find out and I'll come back and we can have that discussion. And in that way, you may not know how to be an answer giver yet if you're just studying this stuff, but you can be an answer finder for people. You say, I'll go find out and bring it back to you. And in that way, you can be an apologist today.
I love that.
I'm also a proponent of this idea of, you know, trying to win the person and not the argument. Of course, you want to make the strongest case possible, but if you lose the person, what's the point? And I think that that people, even if you don't move the person you're debating with or talking to, everyone sees that interaction. When Chad and I did spend quite a bit of time debating in blogs and things like that in the comment sections with people, recurring visitors and stuff like that. And I would get people texting me personally, say, oh, well, thank you for this interaction with so-and-so. So those are helpful. And it's just a mirror image of what you're saying with this debate. You know, your interaction moved the listener because like, wow, I thought he was just going to try to come and fight or defend his position, but he's a real person. Oh, I like him. And it's almost like if the person doesn't like you, they're just not even going to listen to you. It's not, and like you see, you're talking about being a people pleaser, but I don't think maybe that's the word. It's more like, no, you want to win the person. You know, it's not a people pleaser in the negative sense. Now, you've been in the apologetic space for a long time. We're talking about debating people in blog comments. Like there might be people listening like, what's a blog at this point? And things are shifting online. And how have you seen things change as far as your engagement online? What's become easier? What's become harder? Do you find the playing field has changed? What's been your experience?
Absolutely. You know, as I said, when I first started to take off with the channel, Mike Winger was one of the people that really helped me out a lot with that. I remember he did like a private stream one time just for a few of us and himself that nobody could see. It was like unlisted to help some of the people that he thought had some potential here to kind of understand some of the stuff you're talking about right now. But the way that the algorithms, the way that the platforms have changed just in the past few years since then is so dramatic that some of that advice is still good, but a lot of it is now irrelevant. And what is being favored on YouTube, for example, and this is probably true across the platforms, is really exaggerated thumbnails and titles and things like that. And to a certain degree, you have to play ball with that. You don't want to be dishonest, though. I think if you have what we might call clickbait, you need to deliver on that clickbait.
I've noticed like 3 or 4 videos where you say, I'm going to quit this YouTube channel. And I've watched all of them. You have not yet delivered. So
right.
Anyway,
Okay, that's true.
I like you and Pritchett's thumbnails, Braxton, where you go.
That's right. Yeah, we get goofy sometimes. In fact, my wife has said to me before, she's like, why do you make these stupid faces on your thumbnails? And I'm like, well, it's not just me. Like Mike Winger's almost got 1 million subs and he does that. He told me to do that. And he's like, she's like, I don't care. It doesn't look professional. And I get it, man. I get it. There's a cringe factor to all of that. But yeah, there are things that have changed. TikTok, you have to handle differently than you do Twitter, that you have to handle differently than YouTube and Facebook. And I have slightly different audiences on all of those things. But one of the, I'm in a season of experimentation right now, trying to figure out different formats. That was one of the things I said in the video you guys have referred to where I talked about core facts, is I'm trying different things right now different formats. And that means this year I've had some of our biggest videos with like 200,000 views or more. And then I've had other videos that were the lowest. Like I had a live stream this week that currently is like the lowest live stream for the time that I think I've ever had. But then maybe the next video will be way high. You know, it's strange, and you have to try to figure all that out. And I think one of the most important things for me is I got our church to basically create a sort of an online space for people that become Christians through Trinity Radio or something else, so that I can send them, because even though they might be in Canada or Mexico or whatever, I can send them there to a hub where they can start figuring out the Christian faith and have an online semblance of a church while they're trying to figure out where they're going to go to church. And so that's a way trying to fit this all together. But man, you're right. It has made it. I could probably think of a million different ways to talk about that. But if you're a Christian content creator and you start to have a little size to you, I think finding a way for people that become Christians to plug into a trustworthy community is a really important thing.
Yeah, a couple questions. So when you're talking about those different platforms, and this is genuinely because I'm on Facebook and X, like that's it, right? And I'm not like a content creator in the sense that you're talking about, right? So when you have all those different platforms, is that you and Pritchett managing like all of that? Do you have a team that helps you do that? What does that look like kind of behind the scenes?
You know, just like most people do on those different platforms, we have moderators that are just fans that we give them the wrench, you know, so they can make changes. But for the most part, it's me and Pritchett. Pritchett handles a lot in our Facebook group. I'll post new content there. Occasionally I'll post something. It's usually him. YouTube, it's all me. We're still small enough that we can do all that sort of thing. And we like doing all that. But I know other creators that have started to hire or pay a little bit to someone to help them out. Yeah.
Okay. If somebody's listening and they're thinking about possibly, I think this is something that I'm feeling led to do, you know, and you know, maybe perhaps they're praying and the Lord keeps prompting them to, you need to start an online ministry or move in the direction of a content creator or whatnot. Are there any kind of pitfalls that you would encourage them to avoid? Is there any like kind of first one or two or three steps you'd encourage them, like here's where to start? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think that the most important, so for podcasting, you have probably very helpful analytics that tell you exactly what's going on. And for your website, you probably have the same thing. And YouTube does a good job with that. But when you're thinking about the different popular social media platforms, they don't count things the same. YouTube counts things in a very fair way, I think, that gives you a realistic picture of who's engaging with your content. Facebook and X, as far as I understand, somewhat inflate the numbers, because on YouTube, I don't know if this is still the case, but like you have to watch it for however many seconds before it'll technically count as a view. And then if there's double views, they'll go back and rake that off. Whereas on Facebook and X, it just passing through like if you slowly pass over it as you're scrolling, well, that might count as a view. Well, that's not really a view. So that may tempt you to only post on one particular platform because you say, well, I got 10,000 here and I only got 1,000 over there. Well, maybe those 1,000 were real 1,000 and the other 10,000 were people that just happened to scroll past, and that counts as an impression, but shouldn't necessarily count as a view. That kind of thing is important to when you're choosing where you're going to post, because I think that there's a war. Each of these platforms are trying to keep you on their platform for the longest amount of time. YouTube wants you to accept that next video that you linked because they want to keep somebody there and not on Facebook or not on Rumble or not on whatever else. And they all want to do that. And that means, by the way, that if you make a podcast or you make on one of these platforms, or you make a YouTube video and then you try to share that video on Facebook from YouTube, it's probably not going to get the legs, is my understanding, as if you natively posted that on Facebook or on Twitter. And I've seen things that kind of bear that out. So that's important. Also, the way you title these things, and if you're doing a video, the way you thumbnail these things, that has not changed. A great thumbnail and a great title are really important. And AI can really, really be helpful with this. So I think Brian asked about like how AI has done this. Man, I type out about 20 titles. Even if I think the first one's a banger, I'll type out like 20 titles I'll force myself to do it to see what I come up with. And I usually come up with something better. And then there are online tools that you can go to and ask it. ChatGPT, you can go to and ask. You can say, here's my thumbnail that I'm working with. Here's the title that I think I like. How can I make this better? You can tell it, hey, the title, I only want 4 or 5 words, and it'll work within that. So, and it does a pretty good job being helpful with that. Some people don't like AI in their thumbnail images. Honestly, it's an easy way. If you go to Canva's AI image upscaler, you ever had the problem trying to create graphics for what we do, and you get the perfect image of the guy that you're interviewing or something, but it's grainy. It's, he hasn't done public professional stuff. It's like grainy and all that. Well, now it's so easy to throw that into Canva's AI image upscaler, and you can choose, do I want it 2 times, 4 times, 8 times? You do more than 2 times and it starts to look weird, but you can make it look like a pretty decent, people don't know really if it's AI or not with that. And that has really revolutionized and has helped me with clicks. So I think those are some things, especially the thumbnail and title, that are really important.
One of the things I think about, and even just with blogging on Truth Bomb, I've kind of narrowed over the years what I address on there. And it typically is based around what I personally find interesting. But as a content creator, I feel like there's that expectation of when there are these certain hot topics going on in the body of Christ or in the news, that I can imagine there's sometimes a draw of feeling like we need to address this, that, and the other thing. So in this kind of vast world of online madness, if you will, how do you guys decide what to address and kind of what to not address? Does that make sense?
Well, we messed that up horribly. And a lot of us who've been doing it for several years messed that up. And I'll tell you why. Really, if you want to grow your channel. So Winger, I refer to Mike Winger a lot because he's been really helpful and we all know he's really successful at this. And he told us privately, he said, look, if you, whatever it is you're doing, if your whole thing is crocheting lizards, there are 2 billion people out there on YouTube or whatever. And so there are hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people who would really like to watch you crochet lizards. And so the people are out there. Now, obviously for some of us, you got to realize your baby's ugly. And that, by that we mean what you're producing is just bad. Okay. But there really are a lot of people who probably want whatever you've got. But here's the thing. They might like the thing you made on Monday, but not care anything about the thing you made on Wednesday. And so most of us have wrongly, in terms of growth, and Winger says this about himself, been broad in our topics and broad in our variation of lengths of videos or podcasts or whatever. And really, if you have a video, one of the big videos that took off early was when Rhett and Link from Good Mythical Morning Online first deconverted. I did an hour-long video on that, really addressing everything that he laid out. Well, that went up to 70,000 or something back when my channel wasn't anywhere close to doing anything like that. You know what I should have done is the very next video I produced should have been on Rhett and Link and a similar thing about Rhett and Link, because I brought in all these eyeballs over Rhett and Link. And then the next thing I gave them was the moral argument or Calvinism or something else I was talking about that they don't care about. So if you make your channel narrow in that sense, hey, my channel is all about response videos to atheists that are 10 minutes long. Oh man, that's great, because every time someone comes to your channel, they're getting the same kind of thing. But if you did that today, and then next week you're talking about crocheting lizards, well, the crocheting lizards people don't care anything about the atheist stuff, and the atheists probably don't care about the crocheting lizards.
People are going to subscribe to a channel where they know what they're going to get. They want, you're going to dispense me X every week or whatever. Okay, I'll sign up for that. But random stuff, I have to clear my feed every time I see you come up. So yeah, totally get that.
Yeah, that may be specific to YouTube. And it's also true that as your channel grows a little bigger, you can widen what you offer a little bit because you have more of a base.
Yeah, good point.
That's really helpful. All right. So a couple questions about the Matt Dillahunty debate that speaking of YouTube views, I don't know, 84 of those might be me. I don't know. But anyway, I'm exaggerating. But
I really appreciate that. Man, I studied for that thing for 8 months.
Well, it was very evident, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, but it's one of those things now where sometimes when I want to listen to something that I'm familiar with, and I find it's almost like such a wonderfully done debate that I'm like, I'm going to go back and listen to Braxton's debate with
Comfort food.
Dillahunty. It's comforting. It is. It's just like, I don't know. But great. So I remember when William Lane Craig debated Christopher Hitchens. And one of the things that people took away from that is it was a very kind of different Christopher Hitchens. Like he was almost on that people said he was almost on his best behavior. And I don't know if that's because Craig was so formidable. I'm not sure. I suspect that's what it was, but I don't know, because certainly he spoke in front of Christian audiences and had no qualms being Christopher Hitchens. So I kind of attribute it to that. But I wondered, I got that same impression with this debate. Now I'm like you. I enjoy listening to Matt. There are things I agree with Matt on. So this isn't at all a slight on him, but sometimes he can, and I think sometimes it's rhetorical. I think it is a strategy on his part. He can get rather cantankerous and argumentative. And I saw almost none of that in your debate with him. And it seemed like that the rapport was great. And is that your impression too?
Yeah, I was actually coming there expecting what I had watched. I'd watched everything Matt Dillahunty had ever done by that point. Yeah. Which gave me a lot of content to make videos about later on that also helped the channel.
Yeah.
But anyway, the first thing I said to him when I walked in, I had met him once before at the same conference 2 years prior. He had walked in and listened to me give a talk about core facts, as a matter of fact. Oh, wow. And he gave me some notes. He's like, I really liked your presentation. Here's some things I would do. And so so that was nice. And I was really nice to him that day. And then when we met kind of in the aisle at Baylor University in the chapel we were in. And I said, man, Matt, hey, I've really appreciated you as a public speaker. Obviously, we disagree about the substantive things, but, I was really nice to him, asked him about his, I think there were some things going on in his life personally at that time that I knew about. So I was asking him about that. He seemed to appreciate that. I asked him a little, somehow he ended up telling me, hey, I'm not going to be like I am on the Atheist Experience, his television show. I'm going to be more, and I was like, okay, well, great. And so I took advantage of that, to tell you the truth, not deceptively, but I said everything I was going to say and put him in a tough spot where if he's going to, I'm going to let him, give him every opportunity to be the Matt Dillahunty we've seen on television, because that's what I expected. But if he's going to not bring it, I'm still going to bring it. That was my goal.
Right.
Because I'm not going to feel bad for Matt or for our discussion. I want to destroy atheism here, cut the legs out from under it. Yeah. So anyway, but it was very cordial and we joked around a little bit during the debate, but you're right. The tone was good.
And do you think that was because, what do you attribute that to? The fact that just the way you kind of approached it, or the
demeanor? The demeanor, just being a human being to him before. I think that's why a lot of times you hear about with these debates, like they'll go out to dinner before the debate or something like that. I think that's actually a really good strategic thing for the moderator of the debate or the host, because it makes people see each other as human beings a little bit more than a talking head on the computer.
Yeah. And so preparation for something like that, just, again, I think this will interest listeners, kind of behind the scenes who may think, I think sometimes you watch that debate and you're like, I could do that. Yeah. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's like watching, Novak Djokovic play tennis, and you're like, that looks easy. And then you go out and actually try to play. And so kind of that behind the scenes, obviously watching tons of Matt's content, right? But what else does that look like?
Hey, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Some of your followers may know a guy named Leighton Flowers. He's got a ministry talking about Calvinism, but, and he's not a Calvinist. But he became a close friend of mine because he was debating he was going to debate James White, for those that might know who James White is. And before that first debate, he was looking for people from his background as a Baptist who had debates with Calvinists. And I had had 2 or 3 by that point, and he found those. And so we became friends, and then we started to work together, and now he's a professor for us at our school, and he's one of my best friends in the world. But he called me up. He was the head of Texas Baptist Apologetics at the time, who was putting on the conference where Dillahunty and I debated, and where Mike Licona had debated him 2 years before. And so he called me up and he said, hey, you want to debate Matt Dillahunty? And to tell you the truth, just because of the way Dillahunty presents himself online, it was intimidating. And so I was like, man, I don't know. I have to think about that. And he was like, oh, don't worry. I can get Mary Jo Sharp or Frank Turek to do it. They'll be happy. I was like, well, now hold on a second. Maybe we'll do. So I ended up agreeing to do it, but I was very nervous about how it was going to go. As it turns out, I hope this doesn't sound arrogant. As it turned out, I could have had the debate the next day after we scheduled it. But I studied for 8 months, and it gave me a lot of good content. And what I would do is not just listening to everything Dillahunty said, and some of it more than once. And some of the best Dillahunty debates are with a guy named Blake Junta. I don't know if you guys know Blake Junta.
Oh, yes.
I think he's done an incredible job with Dillahunty. But what I would do is, since Dillahunty has all this online content where he's debating, I would try to find one that I hadn't listened to yet. And then I would play Dillahunty's opening statement, and I would take notes as though the debate was happening and it was me right there. And then as soon as he got done, I would pause it without any idea really what I was going to say when I stood up. And I would stand up as though it was my debate without hearing what the Christian was going to say. And I would respond. And I would get to the point where I was really confident. What's that?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I encourage that as a preparation thing. And then, and what's funny is when I ran out of Matt Dillahunty debates to do that with, because I'd heard them all. And so I switched when I was preparing for Dillahunty to Dan Barker debates, because he argues somewhat similarly. Mm-hmm. And that was maybe the providence of God, because I ended up debating Dan Barker right after that. So I had already done a lot of preparation ahead of time that way. I recommend that as a good strategy there. And again, I also recommend mixing in humor, I think you should write what are called briefs. I know other apologists who do this, where you write like things that they could object with, and you write like a little paragraph. I had like 4 pages on biblical slavery and things like that, just in case Dillahunty brought it up, because he so often does. He didn't.
Right.
But I had pages on everything in a notebook with tabs, a physical notebook, because in a debate, I don't trust the technology. If something goes wrong with my tablet, I'm in trouble. So paper is what I went with, and tabs. And so if he asks me about any subject, I can open up right there, and right there's my notes. But honestly, I've already memorized it all at that point and know what I'm going to say, but it's just a backup. And so that was really good. And look for moments to be charitable, like a plan for moments to be charitable. So there was a moment during the Q&A that people can see in that debate. It may have been the first question in the Q&A.
I know what you're going to say.
This kid gets up who's a Christian, who's actually a supporter of my ministry and already was a follower. And I didn't know that at the time. His name's Drew. And he got up and he said, why do you call yourself, or he said, do you believe that God does not exist? And Dillahunty says, well, no, I don't believe that God does not exist. I lack a belief in God, or I don't believe in God, and he says, well, then why don't you call yourself an agnostic? Fair question. But Dillahunty got upset, and he's like, hold on a second. I've hosted the atheist experience for all these years and rah, 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 and all that. Yeah. And I took up for Dillahunty there. I said, look, I might sympathize with the questioner here, but the fact is, it's more important when we're having discussions with unbelievers to hear how they're using that term and what they mean by that term, instead of like trying to force them to use your terms, because the point here is we're just trying to understand what that guy believes so we can properly address that. And I said that, and I think Dillahunty appreciated that. And in fact, it threw him off, because a question later, someone asked him about the cosmological argument. And he said something like, well, my understanding is that, or no, he didn't even say my understanding. He said, well, they added in that everything that begins to exist must have a cause later, because the original cosmological argument would just said everything requires a cause. Well, I knew he couldn't substantiate that, because for one thing, there's not the original cosmological argument. There's all kinds of cosmological arguments. But I asked him right there. Now, this was right after we had developed we had fostered like some goodwill toward each other. And then I just fire across to them, hey, Matt, can you demonstrate that? That's his term. Demonstrate. Yeah. Can you demonstrate that? Demonstrate what? That the original Kalam had that thing. Well, that's what I've been taught. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I said, maybe you could send it to me after the debate. And well, I guess so. Well, that really scored some points in the eyes of the audience, for whom Dillahunty's glass jaw had never been shattered. Well, right there, because I had been friendly prior to that with him, and then straightforward about that, we caught him in a moment where he maybe thought I wouldn't have pressed. And as a result, I've never gotten that answer back from Dillahunty.
I was just getting ready to ask you that. Okay, let me ask you guys this. This is both of you. Is it really sad that as you're recalling these moments in the debate that I can hear them in my head? Does that mean I have problems? I think maybe I literally could hear that part of the Q&A. I even remember what really set Matt off. I call him Matt like I know him. Sorry if you ever hear this, Matt, Mr. Dillahunty, whatever you prefer. No disrespect, but it was the fact that the guy asked him about atheism. Apparently he was smirking. And that's really what he was like. Are you smirking right now? And I remember listening. I had my earbuds in and I was outside doing work and I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm so glad this happened.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so glad.
No, I'm that way with other people's debates.
Yeah.
I've heard every William Lane Craig debate 20 times. I know what you mean.
Okay, that makes me feel better because I was like, this is really sad, Chad. You can hear the audio in your head as he's talking. Like, what does that mean? I love it. So do you have any upcoming debates?
No, honestly, I'll just tell you, debate. I'll be open about this. Debates take a lot out of me. I'm not. I think I was. I don't know if they call me an introvert or not. They say there's a middle one, ambivert. I don't know, but I've classically thought of myself as an introvert cosplaying as an extrovert because all the things like when I speak publicly and all that, I shake all the hands, I kiss all the babies. I'm happy to be there, and I really am happy to be there, and I love everybody there. But then I got to go be alone for a while and like watch TV or just be with my people, that I'm most comfortable with because that does drain me. And debates, for some reason, I think I'm good at debates. I think I'm good at this, but it's so taxing and takes so much to prepare for all of that as a person who's kind of OCD. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I do have OCD diagnosed, but because of that, it takes so much out of me that for the past few years, I've been trying to focus so much on our school and my kids as they've been teenagers that I haven't wanted to block out like a 2-month or 3-month period to mostly be obsessed with this debate. I do plan to come back to it, and I'm often asked. And there are moments on Trinity Radio where we've had an atheist on, and it wasn't supposed to be a debate, and it ended up I debated him kind of. But I'm kind of taking a break from debating for a few years, and then I do plan to get back into it, though.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and this is me, being objective, not fanboying or whatnot, but I do think you're very good at it and would love to see you do more. But I, of course, understand. I can only imagine the time commitment that it requires and the mental bandwidth.
Well, you say you're a fanboy or not a fanboy or however you said that, but maybe I'm the fanboy because I've always been afraid you might sue me. Do you know why?
No.
Don't you run Truth Bomb Apologetics?
Yeah.
Okay. I took all my blog articles at one point and that I had written and made a little book out of that to give away when people sign up for our newsletter.
Yeah.
And so I called it Truth Bombs, Brief Thoughts on Big Issues. And I was like, man, I hope that Truth Bombs guy doesn't call me on copyright.
That's so funny. I have not copyrighted it. So
praise the Lord.
We're good. Yeah, we're good. You mentioned, that's so funny. You mentioned Trinity, the school. Just before we finish up, would you mind telling us a little bit about that in case listeners are looking for a school to attend? And then, of course, let us know where listeners can find more of your stuff.
Be happy to. Yeah. I'm the president of Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary in Evansville, Indiana. It's existed since 1969, always as a distance learning school. So whenever some of the distance learning type stuff, online education was pioneered by one of the former presidents of this school. And so we've been on the cutting edge of that for a long, long time. And in fact, we were like the third website in history that had a .edu or something like that. Oh, and wow. So we've been at this for a long time. We know how to do online education. We're cost effective in a way that I think a lot of schools aren't, and we're theologically conservative and biblically conservative in our approach. Now, I want to be open about the fact that you might be just a layperson and want to go to school here. You might be a person who wants a future in academia, and our school doesn't have accreditation, but we have articulation agreements with a number of other schools. Currently we have with 3 other schools and working on a 4th. And what that means, and these are regionally accredited schools. So where you might spend like $30,000 or something going through a bachelor's program before you end up going to into your master's, well, you could come with us and spend a fraction of that and then articulate into one of our articulated schools and really get a financial boost there and a time boost to get you toward where you need to be and where you want to be. And so those programs have been looked over by those other schools so that we're happy with that. And we've had a good relationship that way. But you know what? Our students have become department heads. Trinity graduates have become department heads at accredited schools. We have teachers, professors at some of the big schools, presidents of seminaries who've had their only doctoral degree from us. And it's never held me back personally. So a lot of our students stay with us straight on through to their doctoral program. But I want people to know that there is a pathway if you want to go further in terms of accreditation. And so we've tried to be all things to all people in that respect so that we can really be flexible and hopefully give people what they need. And we have some people that I think your listeners might know of, like if they know of me, that's great, but they might know of Leighton Flowers. They might know of Tim Stratton, who does a lot of work on philosophy and free will. And then we have Steve Gregg is a radio host across the nation. We have Calvinist and non-Calvinist professors. You're really not going to be in an echo chamber here in that respect. And so I guess that's my elevator pitch for what we're doing. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Braxton Hunter. As Frank Turek used to say, that's how humble I am that I named the website. But also the website is braxtonhunter.com. But everything I do ends up going through YouTube. So the YouTube channel is the best place to find me. But I'm on all the social media platforms under my name, Braxton Hunter. And then, of course, the website's braxtonhunter.com. So Trinity SEM, TrinitySEM.edu will get you there. And really what I wish people would do is, even if you think you might be interested in this 10 years from now, still go ahead and fill out the request for more information on the right-hand side of the screen when you go to TrinitySEM.edu, and it'll be there. And you can do this online in your pajamas at home. I think it's set up for the world we live in today.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on. And, sometimes when you look up to somebody and you get to meet them, it can be, a bit of a disappointment. And this has surpassed my expectations. And just thanks for everything you do.
Man, I appreciate that. That really means a lot. And to tell you the truth, I kind of needed that encouragement on this very day. So that matters a lot to me. Thank you for that. And now I've fulfilled one of my lifelong goals of appearing on the Apologetics 315 podcast.
Woohoo!
Well, that's going to be our last episode now that we've finally made it through Chad's list. Braxton, thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you. I love everything that you're doing, and thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the chance.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have a question you'd like us to address or just a message for us, feedback, good or bad, you can either email us at podcast@apologetics315.com or leave a voice message for us using SpeakPipe. Just go to speakpipe.com/apologetics315 to leave us a message. And remember, if you include a Ghostbusters quote in your question, we guarantee that we'll read it on the podcast. We also ensure up to 50% better quality answers. Also, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review in iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. And please share this episode with a friend if you found it useful. Remember, you can find lots of apologetics resources at apologetics315.com, along with show notes for today's episode. Find Chad's apologetic stuff over at Truthbomb Apologetics. That's truthbomb.blogspot.com. This has been Brian Oughton and Chad Gross for the Apologetics 315 podcast, and thanks for listening.